thanks for tuning in. Now, I can't believe it's been an entire year since I got this thing finished and on the truck. It feels like it was just yesterday that I was in the garage building away on it. All of that stuff still feels really fresh in my mind. I wanted to follow up and do this video kind of after a year of using it and really figuring out what I like about it, what I don't like about it, things I wish I would have changed or done differently, and kind of some hindsight. So why don't we go ahead and get right into it. So let's start off with the pros and what I love about this camper. Now, the very first thing is just the access and ease of use. The whole bed of the truck now is so much more usable in terms of space and what I can put in there and getting access to things with doors on the sides. That's been just like a total game changer. A regular canopy without any doors on the sides is nice, but it really makes using your bed kind of cumbersome, especially if you've got totes and a lot of things in it. And it's definitely not ideal and kind of a pain. This has like changed the game, and that's probably one of the things I love the most, because regardless of if I'm out camping or anything, the side access for the doors is usable, any time through the week, whether I'm going to the hardware store or going out dirt biking. Just the ability to access it from any side of the vehicle and get to my stuff has been absolutely awesome. So another huge benefit to this tent and this build and other tents like this is just this interior space. I'm currently sitting inside here talking to you guys out of the wind. I could close all the doors and be super comfortable in here and kick back and read a book, and that's you kind of get that with a rooftop tent, but it's not necessarily as convenient. Like, I still have access to my fridge in here and all of my other stuff. In a rooftop tent, you don't necessarily have access to really everything that you brought with you, and so you got to go out of the tent and back up into it if you're trying to get food or a snack or more water, things like that. So having this space in here to hang out and get out of the elements is super awesome. I didn't use it a ton this year because it was so nice. I spent all my time kind of outside of the truck. But after I wrap up my solar and putting heat in here, I'm definitely looking forward to getting out this winter and doing some winter camping. Another cool thing is, even without this floor up, I still have standing room. That's a really nice thing about this build and this design is, say, unlike a Go Fast camper where you have to pop out kind of a panel of the bed to have that standing space, this has the full-size bed in it, and then you have space to still climb up in it. So when the tent is popped up and this panel's down, I still have standing room. I can change and do things like that. And on the changing subject, I did use this earlier in the year for a dirt biking trip, and I was able to pop this up in kind of the staging area and use it as a spot to change into my gear, because there really wasn't anywhere else to do that. And one other small little benefit is when you have like a rooftop tent, you're climbing up into it with the ladder. Depending on the tent, there's not a ton of places to put your shoes and keep them out of the elements. So it's just like a really small thing, to be able to have them right here in the truck. They're clean, dry, and warm. Nothing's gotten in them. That's really nice. And then really kind of one of the other benefits is it's a place to go to the bathroom if you need to. I can, pop the roof up, or I don't even need to do that, and I can still use this space as a place to go to the bathroom if I want, if I'm in a more kind of public area, or it's just really windy, or even if the ground's frozen, like in winter, it's really hard to dig a hole in the ground when the dirt is like rock solid. So just another great benefit of this build that I've really enjoyed. Now, another huge benefit to builds like this is just how quick they are to set up and take down. I'm sure a lot of you can sympathize with just getting to camp and setting things up, or taking things down to leave camp. It is not the best part of getting out and camping and adventuring. It's probably the worst part, and so anything that you can do to kind of make that process easier and faster is just going to make the experience more enjoyable, and this certainly hits all the marks there. I think I can have it set up literally in like 10 seconds and take it down in maybe 30 seconds, which is just so unbelievably quick. It's a far cry from the older brick style rooftop tents with the PVC covers. Those things were just such a pain. And I find that as I'm going out more and doing more camping, anything that can just make the experience more convenient and faster, it really pays dividends, and that's exactly what this build's done. And you can get, that same kind of setup speed from other clamshell style, rooftop tents or other campers of this style. Another benefit of having this side access is now the tailgate is a lot more useful for me. You've seen in my videos that I like to cook on the tailgate a lot more. In the past, that would have been really a pain because then you gotta kind of drag the cooler out, set it on the ground so you're not trying to drag it in and out, especially if you have the stove on your tailgate. Then you gotta pull your totes out ahead of time so you don't have to move the stove after everything's already hot. With the access on the side, I can get to my stuff and I can get to my fridge without having to pull it out on the fridge slide. And then I can use the tailgate to just kind of set up somewhere and cook. It means I don't have to pull out my table and set that up. It's just kind of one less thing that I need to do, and it makes getting, to camp, getting set up all that much quicker. So with this DIY build in particular, the main portion of the tent is all built out of 80/20, and this is like really universal aluminum extrusion. There's a ton of accessories out there for the extrusion, allowing you to bolt on all sorts of different things. You can get a whole bunch of different kind of, drop-in bolts and stuff like that. That was one thing I really liked about this. I know the Go Fast Camper uses like a proprietary extrusion, which I get why, they're trying to differentiate themselves, but it's not super convenient for you as the user, and it's probably slightly a little bit more expensive because then you got to have really more specific accessories for it. But with this, there's a lot of off-the-shelf stuff. 80/20 is huge. They make a ton of different things. So I've used this to make my own roof rack that I keep my Max Tracks on. I also had some awning brackets made to hold my awning on the side that are super beefy. I can move anything around where I want to have it, including the roof rack. I can add more bars if I want. And it's all relatively inexpensive to do. And there's just so many parts out there. It's really like adult erector set. And then on the inside, I've added kind of some hooks so I can strap the tent material up because I still don't have like anything to block off that area. So just super versatile and super nice to have. All right, so now that we've talked about what I like about this build, let's get into what I don't like about this build and some of the issues that I've had. Now the first one and the biggest one and the biggest annoyance for me is just really the doors. And there's a couple issues. There's some problems with how they seal, and then there's just some design features and how they function that makes them an issue primarily with water. Now on the seals side of things, the main issue there is the hinges are surface mounted on the frame and on the doors. So there's not a nice, perfectly smooth surface for the bulb seals to kind of mate against to seal off the door. I've had issues and currently are having issues with the adhesive kind of separating from the door because it has to go over the hinge itself. And then issues with the bulb sealing against the frame because, again, the hinge is there, so it provides just the littlest gap for water to kind of seep into. Now, it's not a super huge issue. Really, not very much water gets into this at all from the doors, especially just really sitting still, like parked or even camping, things like that. I've camped out in the rain. It was perfectly fine and dry, and actually the first trip I took was in that freezing snow, and it was fine there. The biggest issue arises when I pressure wash it. That kind of overwhelms the seals a little bit. And then along that same lines, there's no gutter or kind of cover over the top of the doors, so the seal at the top is exposed and water can just sit up there. So when you open the door, then water pours kind of into the back of the truck. It's just really not convenient, not the best. And it's kind of really the thing that annoys me the most about it. The doors, when they're open, they also act as kind of big gutters. So you can see this door has quite an angle to it. So when it's open, rain's falling on it, and then that rain's flowing down and dripping into the back of the bed. And that is definitely annoying when, say, you're trying to cook or you have the doors open because you're getting stuff. quite a bit of water can get in there if it's raining pretty hard. I haven't really figured out a solution yet to stop that. I've got some ideas, just haven't jumped on it. It's been summer, so not a ton of rain or anything like that, so wasn't really a big deal. But now that we're getting into the winter, obviously there's snow on the ground, something that I'm looking to address. The good news though is, since I did build this myself, I can change and tweak a lot of things. There's a lot of different seals I can get and try, so I can kind of figure it out. That is something that I like to do, is really kind of solve these problems and work through them. Obviously, I understand that's not for everybody, and that's a huge benefit to buying something off the shelf from somebody else. Is chances are you're going to have the backing of them if you have any issues, or they have maybe design flaws that they realize, they'll fix it. I know GFC has done that with their old hinges that had issues. They've since replaced them. When you build something like this, if there's a problem, it's squarely on you to address, and there's a good chance that the problem came from something that you overlooked, but that's really just part of it and building something like this. So another issue with this build and other builds like it from, actually bigger manufacturers out there is, if they don't have insulation built into the walls of it, then you're gonna end up with condensation problems, especially when it's really cold out. Now, you can crack windows and things like that to help keep it under control, but once it starts getting cold out here like it is right now, it's just gonna be a problem. Now, I'd done some trips earlier this year, especially when I went to like Christmas Valley. I had frost on the inside of the roof just from my breathing, and I actually used the Mr. Buddy heater because it was so cold that night. So that is kind of a problem. You'll have to deal with that in the mornings by letting it air out and dry out. I always bring a towel with me to wipe out the condensation. That way I'm not closing it up and having it kind of be all moist in there and get moldy and stuff like that. So that's a problem. I haven't figured out what I'm gonna try and do about that. I've thought about maybe putting some sort of quilt or insulative layer on the ceiling and maybe the doors, but I just haven't really kind of done any more research into that. I definitely don't want to like trap moisture into it or behind the layer, so I have to be really kind of conscious about how I solve that. But that's really a minor issue. Condensation in older style fabric rooftop tents is obviously a problem, so it's something that is difficult to get away from unless you start moving up into more expensive toppers, and usually insulation adds weight, so they start to get heavier and stuff like that. But that's just kind of another little small issue. Now, another problem again with water is, I've done a lot of sealing in certain areas, but I'm still having water getting into the frame itself. Now, obviously there are bolts that go through the frame and hit the 80-20 and mount things together that way. I had an issue with actually water flowing in somewhere and getting into this upright piece of the frame here, and I didn't realize it until I looked at some point earlier this year when it was still freezing out, and I noticed that this piece of metal had bulged out, and I was wondering if it was maybe stress or like from going off-road or something like that. And so I thought that actually it could be water that bulged it out because it was really uniform. So I ended up drilling a small tiny hole at the bottom, and water just came rushing out of it. So I've attempted to seal that off, and I thought I would have had it fixed here with sealing off the out from the outside with some Sikaflex. That didn't seem to fix that problem, so it's still there. At least I don't have the freezing issue inside of the tube anymore because I drilled that hole, but that's still something that I'm trying to track down, and probably really on me for not necessarily sealing things up as well as I should have when I was constructing it. Now, people who have reached out to me asking if I've had any issues, that's what I've stressed the most, is like, seal everything you can think of, put silicone, Sikaflex, whatever, just do the best you can to watertight it as you're building it to avoid having issues like this. Now, it's not the end of the world. It is inconvenient, and I would like to track it down so I'm not getting water inside of these tubes and, just rusty water leaking out and stuff like that. So yeah, that's another little flaw, mainly with the construction of it and how I put it together. So the fabric portion of this build and these builds is really pretty freeform. You can do it however you want. You can do your windows however you want. There's a lot of room to kind of get creative, and it's less kind of stringent with how things need to be. So I modified mine a little bit. The windows are a little bit different shape. And one of the things that I changed mainly was the awning that's usually here over the back window. Now I didn't include that on mine because it was something that in previous tents I really didn't open up or use, because it's just another thing that flaps in the wind and creates noise, and I didn't want that, so I left it off of this build. Now what I didn't realize with the design of this window is that it's basically a U and you have the mesh on the outside, and these zippers are waterproof. So the problem is that water hits this wall and then it pools up at the bottom of the U and the zippers on the outside zipper for the mesh. Actually, not a super huge issue. I have to just undo the zipper of the mesh part a little bit so the water can kind of leak through, and then make sure my zippers on the inside flap are just up. I haven't had any water leak into the tent from that side of things, but it's just like a little minor thing that I overlooked. And water just happens to pool up there. But yeah, luckily it doesn't leak into the tent itself, so that is the main thing. So I moved into the truck because it's getting really windy out there and the target shooting in the distance is intensifying. But that really kind of wraps it up as far as the issues that I've had with it over the last year. Really, they may sound like bigger issues, but kind of in the grand scheme of things, they're really, really small, because the benefits of this build far, far outweigh these small issues that I have. And let's be honest, I dove into this with no experience in welding outside of a little bit in high school, years and years and years prior, and no experience welding. So I was bound to overlook some things and run into some problems with just, my lack of experience in doing something like this. And so that was expected to some degree. But overall, I'm super happy with how this build has turned out and just kind of what it's brought for me in terms of getting out and having fun outdoors. It's just such a, I guess, it's an evolution to really the next step from, going all the way back to when I started out with, an old brick style rooftop tent all the way to this. It's just kind of that progression in figuring out what I like and what I want out of my setup. And I'm going to continue to tweak it and add on to it and, address these issues and things like that. And that's just part of the nature of a project like this and a DIY build like this. Overall, this build was also hugely helpful just for me and my confidence in myself and my abilities to tackle projects like this, especially projects where I might not have the experience or haven't, done something like this. It helped me with building the interior and doing like lower ball joints and the, upcoming projects like solar and the heater and stuff like that. Like building this camper was just a big boost in my confidence to take on these projects myself. So in that regard, super, super worthwhile. Hopefully you guys found this video insightful, and if you've been on the fence looking to build a project like this or take on something like this, if you have the time, space, and resources, I highly encourage it. You just have to be okay with potentially running into some snags and taking time to build something like this. Buying something off the shelf is also perfectly okay as well if you don't want to deal with some of these issues or you don't have the time and space. A lot of people don't necessarily have the time and space to take on a project like this. But yeah, I think I'll wrap it up here. This has been a pretty long-winded video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Leave a comment below if I didn't answer something or address something. I'm sure there's probably something that I'm forgetting, but I'll do my best to answer those comments below. Subscribe if you haven't. Lots more projects and trips coming up. I'll catch you guys in the next video.